Well, I think we can get started. Um, I'd like to start with a devotion since it's Reformation Sunday, and this devotion was by Martin Luther, a devotion and prayer. So I'd like to read that. Um, and it's based on Psalm 38, verses 21 and 22. Forsake me not, O Lord, O my God. Be not far from me. Make haste to help me, O Lord, my salvation. Luther writes, whom did God receive but the forsaken? Whom did he heal but the sick? Whom did he make to see but the blind? Whom did he resurrect but the dead? Whom did he make holy but the sinful? Whom did he instruct but the ignorant? He only comforts the miserable and gives grace to those who lack it. Thus, no proud person can receive the holiness, wisdom, or righteousness of God, nor can he receive the work of God, but he depends upon his own efforts, making an earthly, false, boastful saint out of himself, a hypocrite. Hasten to help me, O God, for all others hasten to destroy. God's help is not as human help. God is not the father of the rich, but of the poor, widows, and orphans. He has sent the rich away empty. O Lord, my salvation suggests that I seek no salvation or succor in myself, nor in any other, but in God alone. Let us pray. Teach us, dear Father, not to rely upon or trust in our own good deeds or means, but to venture out upon thine infinite mercy. Let us not despair because of our sinful life, but value thy mercy as higher, wider, and stronger than all our life. Amen. Okay, so those words from Martin Luther introduce us to the idea of law and gospel. And there we go. These are words from Luther's commentary on Galatians. For unless the gospel be plainly discerned from the law, the true Christian doctrine cannot be kept sound and uncorrupt. And later, the early Lutherans in the Formula of Concord included this as one of their articles. We believe, teach, and confess that the distinction between the law and the gospel is to be maintained in the church with great diligence. Now, by the time of the Formula of Concord, there were some differing opinions among Lutherans, even at that point. But here is Louis Cranach, an early or an artist of the Lutheran in the Lutheran tradition, produced several variations on this print or this painting. And it was entitled The Law and the Gospel. If you look at that and take a moment or two to contemplate, look at that and what do you notice?
Could you just say, basically the dilemma between law and gospel? You're like pretty much.
We're gonna get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. But this is an introductory piece to look at an early way of showing law and gospel for Lucas Cranach. Can you see anything that stands out to you?
There's Adam and Eve and a skeleton for death.
Okay, there's Adam and Eve. Talking, indicating the fall. And there's a skeleton, and what is the skeleton doing? Okay, prodding and chasing. And what is this over here? Can you tell? Flames, fire. So prodding and chasing into hell. The whole notion of that. This here is the Ten Commandments, and so it's Moses. And there are other teachers or that are represented there. And they, of course, are part of that whole thing of the law. And we have the gospel over here.
And we have the God the Father with the order of the universe.
Okay. Yes, up here on the law side is God as the king of the whole universe
Judge here.
and judge.
And then, what's that, the tent, is that just war and?
The tent actually, as I understand it in this version of this painting, is the village of the people in as they were in the Exodus and traveling, and right here is the bronze serpent that still they were, even though that can be a sign of redemption for the people at that time, it's placed on that side because they were living under the law, was the belief of Anak. What do you see on the gospel side? Oh, great.
Death and resurrection.
Okay, death and resurrection. This is John the Baptist. And John the Baptist is pointing the way to Jesus, who dies, and then the resurrected Jesus is above, ascending. And so it's the contrast. Do you notice anything else?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
lamb and the,
Okay, the lamb,
And-
yeah,
And the
the
serpent.
lamb and the serpent.
and isn't the stone gonna crush the snake?
The stone is the tomb being opened up, yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. You also have, the reality of death, yeah. But Jesus rose. The other thing you may or may not have noticed is, what about this tree in the middle?
It has, it's dead limbs on the left side.
Dead limbs on the law side, life on the gospel side. And so we have this, the vision or this picture among early Lutherans about 1529 of the law and gospel, and this is a visualization. So as you think about law, what comes to mind? What is the law? And what is its purpose?
10 Commandments.
10 Commandments come to mind. Yep, yep.
Rules.
Rules,
Is it Leviticus?
rules. Leviticus, yeah,
All live together.
how to live together. Okay. So that's a more positive view. Anything else comes to mind in shorthand, Scott?
To show us we're sinful.
To show us we're sinful.
Yeah.
Purpose of the law. There's the Luther.
Scare people.
To scare people. Well,
Well, scare straight.
in a sense that show us we're sinful can be scary. So
To make us right with God.
to make us right with God, there are those who look at the law that way. That would not be a Lutheran perspective at all. So, Michael,
To bind the community through a mutual code.
bind the community through a mutual code. Okay? And Fred,
I think it's an accommodation by God to say they want to-dos and not to-dos as opposed to a relationship.
accommodation from God because people like do's and don'ts. As opposed to a relationship, over and beyond a relationship. Okay, now let's contrast. What is the gospel in your mind? And what is its purpose?
It's good news.
It's good
Good
news.
news.
Good news, good news. Meaning of gospel,
Freedom.
freedom. Thinking back to that painting, what was the gospel?
Like,
Yeah.
The proclamation of Jesus' death and resurrection for us.
some hope.
Help,
Hope.
hope, yeah, source of hope. Anything else about the gospel's purpose?
No, to point out that this is God's love for us and God's work for us.
Okay, to show us God's love and work for us. That we are blessed by the grace of God. Okay, let me look at the traditional three uses of the law that are spoken of. First, civic use of the law to organize society and maintain order so that there will be opportunity for the gospel to be taught and heard. But the civil use of the law, so that's one of the positive uses. That there's a place for laws about how fast we drive, which side of the road we drive on. There are laws, place for laws to organize society in terms of don't kill, don't steal. The ones we traditionally think of as they're part of the Ten Commandments. But the civic use of the law was used to organize society and keep us functioning together. The second use of the law in Lutheran practice or Lutheran thought is to reveal the power of sin and show that we need the gospel. If we place ourselves under the Ten Commandments, for example, how many have completely abided by those?
Yeah, we'll fall short.
We fall short, we fall short. There's an old movie where I think it's Burt Lancaster or something or Burt Reynolds maybe, was drowning.
Oh, yes.
And he says, he prays to God, save me, God, and I'll obey all the Ten Commandments.
Make me a better swimmer.
And goes on, but as he gets a little bit closer and closer to shore, well, I'll learn the Ten Commandments. And then, oh, well, it kind of passes. But to reveal the power of sin and really to kill us in our own self-righteousness. Now, the debatable point in Lutheran theology is this one, the third use of the law. And by the Formula of Concord in 1579, there's a reference to the third use of the law. The debate is that Luther? Did Luther accept that? Luther never taught that.
Is that the same as saying sin no more?
Well, no, it's to say that the Ten Commandments and the rest of the law is all those things that we're supposed to do after we are saved, after we come to faith. And that's the things we're supposed to do. The debate about that is what happens if that's abused or misused?
Get to heaven is.
Exactly, it becomes that, and it becomes also, one of the complaints or criticisms that Lutherans had of some of the Reformed traditions was, okay, doing these things shows that we're part of the kingdom. And the Lutherans reacted against that it's not, that it's not a proof that we're somehow in, and that's very close to works righteousness. And so to avoid that, so we know for sure that Luther would adopt the first use and the second use. He taught that very clearly. The third use is present among Lutherans, but it's not attributed to Luther. We can't trace it back there. Now, if we were to talk about a misunderstanding of the law, what would some of the things be that would happen if the law is misunderstood, or the role of the law, purpose of the law?
We all go to hell.
We'd go to hell.
Or it's your ticket to heaven.
Or
Yeah.
works are the ticket to heaven. What else? What kind of attitudes does it create among us?
Judgment.
Judgment. We can use it to judge.
Like legalistic, dogmatic.
Legalistic.
We're better than the other guys.
Ah, yes, pride. And we're better than someone else. Because we obey. We follow these commands. Anything else? Okay. Let me just run through a few that I thought of. Okay, that the law provides a way of salvation. That the law reveals who's saved and provides a method to show my standing before God. If I act really in a pure way, we know that God is pleased with me. And third, that the law gives us ammunition to accuse or judge others. That's a pretty quick method of misusing the law. I remember in the parish that there was a woman who wanted me to preach against this sin or that sin. You know what? It wasn't a sin that she had an issue with personally. What was the sin she had a personal issue with more was pride and judgment. Because she wanted this accusation of those who were violating a certain principle that she thought should be held up. Let's see. Now, what are the dangers of emphasizing the law without the gospel? Self-righteousness. I overvalue myself and my own goodness, my own greatness. Judgmentalism, undervaluing others. On the other hand, undervaluing my own value. Conflict and separation, I believe, are really aspects of not having this, and I don't want to be mistaken here. We're not talking about law is bad, gospel is good. We're talking about this holding on to this tension and valuing them or understanding their purpose and utilizing that purpose in our community. But conflict and separation, if we're blaming each other, if we're, and I have been aware of churches where, when something goes wrong or something isn't just right, where the goal seems to be blaming, pointing out who's to blame, who did it wrong, who's causing this problem. That's the function of the law, misused. It's law misused. And it breaks down the community. And finally, with that, the inability to overcome challenges because the focus is on blame rather than solutions. I believe the work of the gospel moves us towards saying, God loves us. God has done this. Now, where do we go from here? Yes, Susan.
I was gonna add, it goes along with what you just said. I think it can, can lead possibly to Christian nationalism.
I really think the Christian nationalist movement is reflective of a misuse, misunderstanding, misuse of law and gospel. Not getting it.
I think, yeah, that, they just ignore Jesus and the whole deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love your neighbor.
And they hold up themselves as we're the ones.
Yeah.
Being righteous.
We're the ones, we're righteous. And not understanding that the gospel is for everyone, for all. Yeah. Okay, then misunderstanding the gospel without the law, this one might be tougher for you. If we misunderstand the gospel or use the gospel without the law, what are some of the risks?
Cheap grace.
That,
Cheap grace. Anything else come to mind?
that I don't have to follow the law, I'm gonna be saved anyway.
What I do doesn't matter.
Yeah, like a lack of direction.
Anyone else have any thoughts? Yes, Michael.
It's harder to communicate in the community why you're doing what you're doing. You know, you've got to fall back on this, it's God's will.
Okay, it's harder to communicate within the community. All you fall back on is it's God's will and don't clarify how we're living. Let's look at a couple here. Cheap grace. Lack of accountability. Cheap grace would be lack of accountability. There could be a pride and a lack of humility. And a self-centeredness that enables us to say, it's me and Jesus, or that kind of attitude. and so on. That becomes a misunderstanding of the gospel without the law, without attention with the law. Now, how would a misunderstanding or an inability to distinguish law and gospel manifest itself, do you think, in the family? Within a family? What could be misunderstandings or misuse of this law gospel?
Too strict rules without relationship.
Too strict rules without relationship. What else?
Because I said so.
Because I said so.
Hmm.
That godlike approach.
Lack of forgiveness.
A lack of forgiveness.
Value would be performance-based.
Excuse me?
Value would be performance-based.
Value would be performance based. This kid's my favorite because he's good at math. Or a good student,
Or he always comes home by 10 o'clock.
or always comes home by 10 o'clock. Yes, Michael.
Flip side might be a lack of enforcing consequences, a misplaced trust.
Yep, a misplaced trust and a lack of accountability. That certainly would be an inability to have that tension with law and gospel. How about that? That would certainly be that accusatory valuing only on performance, that sort of thing. And the abuse could go beyond verbal and accusatory. Antinomian parenting. Anything goes. My kid would never do anything wrong.
All of which are good examples for violating the law.
Violating the law, yeah, those, although the abuse or verbal accusatory sort of thing would be an imbalance in judgment on legalistic means and not the sense of the gospel. But yeah,
It would be exerting dominance and tyranny.
yeah, dominance and tyranny. How about focusing on who to blame rather than how to solve problems?
Not the right question.
Not the right questions? Yeah. Michael,
Reliance on the law can result in a rigidity and therefore not focusing on solutions because you're not open to what the Holy Spirit's doing.
exactly. That's a reliance on the law becomes, I don't care if it's prom. Your curfew is 10 o'clock. Not having a sense of that sense of fluidity, of some gospel. Peter.
Now, after the New Testament, don't we have the law going into people's hearts? And so it's more of a tuning of a person. Isn't that the direction of?
And that would be a Lutheran perspective that acknowledges a third use of the law. I'm a regenerated believer. And so the law is within me. And there's a sense in which there is some validity to that. That we do have a sense of, there's a response to God, a life of faith. Luther talked about the loving our neighbor and, you know, acting in certain ways, but it gets to be challenging when, and gets to be out of balance or out of tension when the law moves in and takes over for gospel. The gospel is always at the core. As I said earlier, even the civic use of the law for Luther was so that society is organized in such a way that there's room for the gospel to be preached. And for the gospel to have an effect in our world. Susan?
I was gonna add one more, is focusing on the parent, like. Not having enough gospel with yourself as a parent, like you can't make mistakes, you don't have any. You have to
Okay,
be a perfect parent, or your kids, it's all your fault.
yeah, could you hear that?
No,
She was talking about the other side of that would be, you know, antinomian parenting would be the sense of a parent gets blamed for everything. Or everything needs to be you know, the accusation is that it's all the parent is messing it up.
Where the parent can't forgive themselves.
Right.
Yeah, or an internal thing for the parent. I can't forgive myself for what I did. Yeah. How about relationships between siblings or among siblings? That's that inability to see the value in each other. But rather, I'm better than you. I'm more accomplished than you. And sometimes that's internal, where a younger sibling will come along and I can't live up to what my older sibling did. And then we lose, we lose a sense of grace. How do you think that would happen in the political arena? And politics is not meant to be theological. But there are aspects of law and gospel that are playing out every single day.
yeah, it would be nice if law, thought about gospel.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, what do you hear beating on the drum constantly right now?
Law and order, law without love.
You hear about law without love. I hear it's the Democrats that shut down the government.
Yeah.
It's the Republicans that caused the shutdown. Why don't they say, what are we gonna do about it? Instead, they're working overtime to try to affix some blame on somebody else. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. Ice, yeah. Yeah. That whole thing and we've got it down ice, we've got it to a point where we're saying, every immigrant illegal is a criminal. Well, they're a criminal because they have broken the law if they're not in the country with documentation. But are they criminals?
Back to the lead.
Or are they simply looking for a way of life? Scott?
Wonder about how would the gospel show up in the political arena? And with Luther even
suggests that that was a possibility. I mean, talks about the law, you know, governing civic responsibility, and then the church is the vessel of the gospel. Are we, does it go too far to think that the political world could actually live according to the gospel or act according to the gospel? I wish they could.
Yeah.
It would be nice if all churches would observe the. gospel.
It would be nice if churches did, much less the political scene. And I don't know that Luther would say that the political arena would rightly have this law gospel dialectic. However, he does say that the political arena or the civic society is setting up laws so that we can function. And so the blaming is a violation or a misunderstanding of law gospel. It's also a misunderstanding of law, the rightful role of law. And if the civic society is predominantly organized by law, there's still a place for that sense of purpose and getting to work together in a direction.
You know, picking up on what Scott said. We rush so fast to tie anything to do that's similar to what we've heard in scripture or the gospel to other things. And sometimes they coincide, but it doesn't necessarily mean they need to be tied. Because I think one of the key issues to this question is, are we members of this kingdom? Okay.
Yeah.
Are we members of the kingdom that Jesus brought?
Yeah.
And it's very clear, you can't be members of two kingdoms.
I
Well,
think you are.
we are members.
You
of
are
two
at
kingdoms.
different times.
In different times.
We
Yeah.
are members
You know,
of
I
two
think
kingdoms,
I
yeah.
think that's one of the questions we have, of what rules in which kingdom?
The interesting thing, looking at Luther's understanding of two kingdoms. He talks about the kingdom on the left and the kingdom on the right. The kingdom on the left involves civil society, involves the arena that we live in. Kingdom on the right, the kingdom of faith, the kingdom of connection with being connected to God. And an example, interestingly, where do you think Luther puts the church?
Yeah.
Kingdom on the left, because it's an organization. It's got organizational principles and so on. So in some ways, if we say, well, you know, in the church, they would never. No, the church is very human, is very much wrapped into the package of an organization. So in that sense, we do live in both kingdoms. So, yeah,
I was gonna say, in some ways, the Pope kind of walks that line pretty well.
Hmm.
He can say some things that are for sure gospel centered and has an impact, I think.
What was that?
she said the Pope can sometimes say things that are gospel centered, but also there's a distinction sometimes. I wouldn't look at the papacy as an example for us of the kingdoms, but
The last pope kind of was. What do you think Luther would say about civil disobedience?
anybody else? If you heard that, what would Luther say about civil disobedience? Well,
In a sense, it's a gospel reaction to the law. Specifics of what the law is doing at that time, and
Yeah.
it's a gospel reaction to that.
he didn't specifically practiced civil disobedience to the political figures of his day.
But Jesus did.
But yes, but Luther certainly practiced civil disobedience toward the Catholic Church, which was the big organization. And he stood fast to certain things. He was excommunicated, but he did not respond with personal violence per se.
Wasn't he against the 30 Years' War? Luther?
Yeah, he was against the 30 Years' War, which in a way would raise a question, because the 30 Years' War was against some oppressive. There was some oppression, there was that conflict societally, but
I was gonna say the Native American distinguish of law and gospel seems to have a real different flavor and feel to it. And we had a Native American speak the other week, but any response on that, is there another way of looking at these?
certainly there are other ways to look at it. This is a very Lutheran perspective.
So like when I hear like a Native American like speak, and that's, very generalization. But I feel like they bridge these two things together more.
Perhaps. Perhaps, but I think the thing I really want to get at here is it's not good and bad. It's not Old Testament and New Testament. Luther talked about the Old Testament, for example, being the cradle for Christ. However, there is a tendency to distinguish here. And so that's part of the issue, that we need to hold the tension of law and gospel.
Another thing, I haven't been in the process workshops as I wanted to be, but those that have would probably say it's also not immutable, it's changing. It's relative to the times. God may reveal God's self in a different way. The relationship between law and gospel may be changing. We just have to stay in the moment.
There may be changes in our world that impact how this is perceived. I will say, for example, what was Luther really addressing in his world? He was addressing indulgences. That's corruption. He was dealing with a sense of what he felt was this demand, this moral demand to do right works to achieve salvation. And with that, he was dealing with despair, with I think despair would be a good word for a lot of what he was looking at. That the legalism leaves a person in despair. And it's only the gospel that can provide hope, salvation.
But ignorance is another thing. I think that he was, and by that I mean, he
Yeah.
wanted everyone to have access to the word.
Right,
He
right.
wanted to help people understand what they were doing in worship, so that it wasn't done by one person standing in front and the rest.
Yeah.
Show up,
Legalism
but-
run amok, which it always will do eventually.
Yeah. So, a little more in the political world, blame becomes a prevalent response. inability to compromise. A we versus them mindset. You know, I would say in recent years, it's become, you know, we had a speaker here, probably 3-4 years ago. I can't remember exact, maybe a little longer than that. But who talked about the fact that, when many of us were growing up, our parents as Protestants didn't want us to marry a Catholic. Or a relationship with a Catholic was questionable. When we were growing up, a relationship between a person of color and Anglo was at question. And the person said now, when asked what they most wouldn't want their child to marry into is the opposing political party. There's been that kind of shift.
That
And it's
makes
a
more
we
sense.
versus them. It's a we versus them mindset.
Yeah.
Law and gospel, when it's rightly distinguished, is not a we versus them. We are condemned. We're killed by the law. We are raised by the gospel. We have new life because of the gospel. And that's not a distinction between one and the other. There's one way that we have to be saved, to be right with God. And that's the gospel. Stalemate. Now, if we look at other aspects of our life, business, church, schools, media, how do you see this inappropriate or inaccurate distinction of the law and gospel playing out? What ways do you see that as being problematic?
School board elections.
What was that?
School board elections.
School board elections. School board elections. You've been getting stuff in the mail.
So even like healthcare, we still argue about healthcare
Yeah,
and how that's supposed to be an individual choice and an individual responsibility instead of looking
Yeah.
at society.
Yeah.
What the world's doing and what we are doing.
yes.
I think it goes back to what Michael was talking about. We get too rigid on what we think
Okay,
a certain statute requires, as opposed to asking ourselves, what is currently required in order to dispense grace or love,
yeah,
you know, or what's totally right for society.
yeah. We get rigid. We get rigid.
I think our Second Amendment arguments.
Mhm. Yeah, they didn't have AR-15s when that was written into the Constitution.
And it was well-regulated militia.
It was a well-regulated militia, you know, those kinds of things, you know, where are we at? How can we, as a society, live with the law? But I think for we who are Christians, question is, how do we promote the gospel? The well-being of the world. The love of God for everyone. That, you know, and I'm not asking for the United States government to just hold fast to that. That's an institution of law.
It's not anymore.
But
Used to be.
yeah, yeah, well, or abuse of law in many ways. So,
Abuse of laws also.
Yeah.
There are a lot of them.
Um. One thing, before I do a final slide. For Luther. The devil. Or Satan. Was about accusation. Devil and Satan, yes, was about temptation. But Luther was a lot less concerned about the little petty little things where Flip Wilson said, the devil made me do it type stuff. The whole notion of that, the devil or Satan was accusing, defeating, and making us prideful or washed out. And so when Luther thought about the devil, he thought about that sense that the devil was accusing him and trying to defeat him and to doubt the gospel. So here's a quote from Luther. It comes from his table talks, so it's kind of an informal conversation around the dinner table. And some students took note. And here's what he said. That's probably cleaned up a little bit. I don't think he said kiss my backside.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, I think he said worse. But the whole idea of being under condemnation, under that power of the law to tell us there's no hope. Luther wanted us to be able to make that distinction and understand the role of the law, but the power of the gospel. The power of the gospel to say to the devil, kiss my backside. And know that we are saved by the grace of God. That it is the power of God who works mercy in our lives. So, thank you. And distinguish the law and gospel in your life.
Thank you.
You want to. I know. I know.